Joining me today is Trent Steele. So now you're the director and founder of an organization called the Anti-Predator Project, which you're doing quite amazing work with this project as well. And so with that, you're also going to help us understand the ongoing trial, the infamous trial of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein as well. That's currently going on right now as we speak. So Trent, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So before we jump into the trial and, before we unpack that, tell us a little bit about why you got started with this project and what you hope to accomplish by it.
Well, we've been doing this about 10 years. I was working with children in foster care back in early 2011, and I was hired back then to be an independent living coordinator. So I had the opportunity to work with a lot of kids transitioning from foster care, turning 18, and going into the real world, so to speak, right? And through that opportunity, I had the pleasure to work with a lot of teenagers that had some very cool stories and some that had some very heartbreaking stories. And some of those heartbreaking stories were some teenage girls that had been trafficked and had some horrible things done to them. I worked with a young lady whose pimp made her tattoo his name on her eyelids. I had another girl that was branded with a coat iron. And it was stuff that really, was very, very disturbing. So, I at the time I was also working as a private investigator part-time for another firm to kind of help make ends meet and make a little bit of extra money. And around that time, I also had the opportunity to work on a couple of human trafficking cases through the PI firm that I was working with. So, it was one of those things where I started talking to my wife about it, and this was something that I was pretty passionate about. So back in 2011, her and I co-founded this, and we've been doing it ever since. And it's kind of gotten bigger and bigger over the years. It started off working, one or two cases a month, and they were, very simple cases. And, it was usually, little Johnny or Susie goes missing, and we find them smoking weed down by the beach with their friends because they're pissed off at mom and dad for taking their phone.
Right.
And that's morphed into, here we are 10 years later, and I've got somewhere around 50 cases in 15 states and 5 countries right now. And the cases have gone from simple missing children cases to we do a lot of organized crime now. We work with the mob and the cartels quite a bit. So the cases have changed in complexity and resource wise. So it's been a long 10-year journey, but we've been able to do a lot of good. I think to date I've worked nearly 300 human trafficking investigations. We've turned over, nearly 10,000 pages of actionable intelligence to law enforcement. This year alone, we've recovered 11 missing children, which has been very, very good. We've closed 13 cases, so things are going well.
Good. I'm glad. So now with this case that we're seeing unfold in front of us, the Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell trial, how is this, do you think, any different from any other high-profile case that we've seen so far in terms of sex trafficking and sexual abuse cases?
Well, I think the short answer to this, right, is we've got a identified human trafficking ring that's made up of not just powerful people here in the United States, but essentially the most powerful people in the world. Royalty from other countries, politicians from other countries, actors, musicians. I mean, the elite of the entire world are involved in this. And it's very interesting, right? Because you would think that this would be front page news all over the world, and it should be.
Right.
I mean, it literally should be front page news all over the world. What these people have done to these children and the way they took advantage of these kids that were having a struggling home life, I mean, it's nothing short of evil. In fact, we just posted an article on our social media today about the trial where one of the victims that testified, described how they took advantage of her when her home life was crumbling. Her dad had just died, and the things that they did to her all the way back when she was 14. Right. And the fact that these people the media's kind of looked the other way for the most part. I mean, outside of a couple of news outlets, the mainstream media for the most part has kind of looked the other way. We've not given this case the coverage it deserves. We've done a huge disservice to the victims of this whole horrible situation by not giving it the coverage that it deserves. But, you go back and you talk to, some of the people that were involved, and you look at some of the news pieces that have come out, the documentary that was posted up on Netflix, and the reporter from Vanity Fair that wanted to break this article, all the way back, I believe, in the late 90s. And all of a sudden she goes to her editor, and her editor squashes the piece. Right. Because her editor's friends with Epstein. This case is so horrible, and it's so bad. And I think everybody that's touched this thing needs to be held accountable on some level. If you helped cover it up, if you looked the other way, you need to be held accountable. The way the U.S. attorney here handled it back in the early 2000s when he was arrested in Palm Beach, the sweetheart deal he was cut. The way the U.S. attorney's office handled that was embarrassingly bad. Absolutely embarrassingly bad. And this case, the ball has been dropped on every level. And I don't think the victims will ever get the justice that is coming to them. But, the cancel culture, right, in today's world is so strong. We need to take that cancel culture and turn it on the people that were involved in this. Every powerful person, every politician, every actor, every entertainer. If you were a part of this, then as a society, we need to shut you down. Right. It's that simple. Because you don't deserve to have a presence.
I want to go back to something you said earlier where the mainstream media particularly just sort of looked away from this case. I mean, we've seen few outlets report on this case extensively. For instance, the New York Times, like they've been covering this, daily. Why is that? Why do you think the mainstream media sort of just turns a blind eye when it comes to covering cases like these, for example?
Well, I mean, there's two schools of thought on this, right? You can crawl down the conspiracy theory hole and say, oh, they're all involved in it, and which I don't think that's the case. I mean, there's a lot of powerful people involved in this, but I don't think every major news outlet, every major editor is involved in this. But I think that, as with everything in today's world, right, follow the money. And there's a lot of money attached to this. The people that are involved in this, they buy a lot of advertising. They spend a lot of money at businesses. They have a lot of stake and stock in businesses. And, I think a big reason for a lot of it is, I'll be completely honest with you, a lot of people are cowards. They don't want to cover it because they're afraid of the repercussions. They're afraid they might lose the dollars. They're afraid something bad might happen. They're afraid to step up and do the right thing, give this thing the coverage that it should have, because they're worried about the fallout. And I really think that's a coward's way out. I'm very encouraged when I see outlets like yours covering this. It's nice to see an outlet that's got a large presence covering this story and not being afraid to cover the facts. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, money, is pretty much the king of all. And when people are afraid of losing it, unfortunately, they put morals, integrity, and doing the right thing behind the almighty dollar. And that's sad that that's where we're at.
And so, when we talk about a trial like this, when we talk about Ghislaine Maxwell, for example, we can't not talk about Robert Maxwell, her father, her famous father, who is now no longer with us. But so in terms of the media coverage that sort of shaped his identity and shaped the way that he was perceived, Can you talk a little bit about how that changed over time, especially coming into like the mainstream media with the internet, and how that sort of evolved over time?
Well, going back 20, 30 years, right? It was a lot easier to paint people in a certain light, right? Because you didn't have things like the internet, and you didn't have things, right now it's hard to paint people in a certain light if people really want to look at it, because honestly, everybody's a Google search away from finding out, if you've been arrested, if you've been charged with a crime, who you really are. So, I think obviously that's the big reason things have changed over time, because information is easier to get a hold of now. As far as Ghislaine goes, I'll be honest, she's probably right next to Epstein himself, one of the most evil people involved in this thing, and I'll tell you why. I've dealt with a lot of trafficking victims over the years, right? Where, I don't know how familiar you are with the trafficking terminology, where you have what they refer to as a bottom girl, right? That kind of is in charge, and she starts off as one of the girls that's being trafficked, regular, and she just kind of works her way up, and all of a sudden now she kind of becomes in charge, and they've been known to do some horrible things to these girls. They've been known to beat them and exploit them themselves and do some horrible things. Many times in those cases, they do that out of survival, right? They do that because they're afraid that if they don't run their ship the right way, that they're going to get beaten. They're going to get tortured. And so that raises the question of, are they really a predator, or are they doing this for survival? In Ghislaine's case, she comes from a privileged background. She had money. She had resources and means. She didn't have to do any of this. She didn't have to be involved. She made the conscious choice to be involved in this. And that, to me, when you make the conscious choice to do the things that she has done to people, that she orchestrated with these girls, you're a bad person. You're an evil person. And you deserve to spend as much time behind bars as this jury sees fit.
And so, he talks about the term survival. It really doesn't make sense, with someone like Ghislaine Maxwell, like you said, who made this conscious decision to want to go through with these actions, and as a result, now we're seeing the consequences unfold in front of us. If we were to talk about survival, what do you think she was looking for in that instance? What's the case there? With
Ghislaine, I don't think any of this was about survival.
Okay.
She got pleasure out of this. This was her entertainment. This was her way to be a part of the elite social circles. This was her way to have that life. In my opinion, there is no case you can make for Ghislaine having to do this because she was forced, because she was coerced, because she was scared. She did this because she wanted to. And I think it's really that simple. I don't think there's any other way to go about it. She did this because she wanted to. She enjoyed it. She was a part of everything that was wrong about this entire situation.
And so, as the trial unfolds, what's something that you're looking for right now? What's something that you're keeping your eye on in terms of seeing both sides of Ghislaine, in terms of how this trial is painting, how this trial is perceiving her to be, whether that's the villain side or maybe the victim side? Like what are you looking for in this trial?
Really, what I'm looking for out of this trial is just some honesty and some truth about what happened. Ghislaine, the things that she did to these girls, I don't think can ever be forgiven, but you can take a large step back in the right direction by making sure that you point fingers, that everybody else that was involved in this is held responsible, that she doesn't become the fall guy for all the rich celebrities, politicians, world leaders that were involved in this. I really would like to see her be brutally honest about what happened. And I would like the courts and I would like the media to be very honest and very clear about reporting the facts, because this is a case that the world deserves to know what happened. The people involved in this are people that in some cases are elected officials in various countries that are supposed to be examples of integrity, right? And examples of how to live your life, and people that voters and citizens of different nations have entrusted to make policies and laws regarding their safety and their well-being. And at the same time, these people are involved in doing horrible things to women and children. Some of the people involved are celebrities, actors, musicians, right? That our kids idolize, people's children look up to. The world deserves to know who these people really are. While Ghislaine is not an innocent party in this, she's not the only party. And she should not be the only one held accountable for this. She's one of, at this point, who could be hundreds of people that were involved in this. So while she did some horrible things, and she needs to be held accountable for those, she is not the only person involved, and we should not paint her as the only person involved. This trial should be the opportunity that we never got with Jeffrey Epstein, that the world wanted with Jeffrey Epstein. This trial should be the opportunity to set the record straight and shine the light in the dark corners, and light up the people that are doing bad things behind everyone's back.
And so, you spoke about this early in the early 2000s when Jeffrey Epstein was in fact charged but only served a short sentence. He didn't serve the sentence that he was supposed to serve. What did that indicate about the justice system and whether justice will be served or deserve to be served?
Well, I'll go back to what I said earlier, right? Money is king. And there's a lot of times that that we point fingers in how our justice system is, and the justice system here in the United States was designed to be fair. It was supposed to be fair. It was built to be fair. That's the way it was supposed to be. Unfortunately, we've seen it in the Epstein case. We've seen it in other cases throughout the years. When you have money and you can buy power, you don't necessarily serve the same sentence as the person that can barely scrape together 2 nickels on the street, right? I've said it for a long time. I think Acosta, the gentleman that was the U.S. attorney at the time that brokered that deal with Epstein, his career should be scrutinized. There should always be an asterisk next to his name for what he did and the deal that he cut, the stuff that was allowed to happen. I don't know if that will ever happen, but in my opinion, he should be held accountable on some level for this, because he had an opportunity to put an end to this years and years ago, and he did not. In fact, he just further perpetuated the circle that, hey, if you've got money and you've got power, we're not interested in prosecuting you. So while I believe that the justice system here in the United States is still one of the best in the world, and that, we get it right a lot, juries get it right a lot. The American people are incredibly intelligent, and when you put it in front of a jury, they get it right. But people are not perfect, and when you've got a system that, relies on judgment of people and judgment of individuals, there's going to be some flaws in the system along the way. And unfortunately, the Epstein case pointed out one very big flaw in our system.
No, for sure. So, flash forward to when we found out that, Epstein had, taken his own life in a prison, 2 years ago, allegedly. For you who has been involved in a project like this, the Anti-Predator Project, what went through your mind in terms of the victims that were affected by this? And, did you feel like justice is going to be served eventually, or what went through your mind at that time?
Well, so it's mixed feelings, right? The first feeling is, as a human being and as a person of humanity, the first feeling is, well, good riddance. He's gone, right? We don't have to deal with him anymore. And I think anybody that didn't think that, they're lying to themselves, because I think everybody on some level was like, well, you know what, got kind of got what was coming to him. The other part of you and the part of me having worked, hundreds of these cases over the years and seeing how important closure is to the victims of these crimes in order for them to be able to move on with their life and put the pieces back together. Closure is a very empowering thing. And this guy being found dead in his prison cell was not the closure that these women needed. They needed justice. They needed to be able to tell their story. They needed the other people that assaulted them, the other people that were part of this, to be held responsible. And a large part of that died when he did.
Right.
And so while, the world is a better place without Jeffrey Epstein in it, without a doubt, the women got robbed of their ability to get justice for what happened to them. And society got robbed of the ability to get justice for the other people involved in this. And I think that's what we're getting a second chance at with the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, is a second chance for the women that were victimized to get justice for what happened to them, and another chance for the justice system to get it right and hold the other people, aside from Ghislaine Maxwell, responsible for what happened and responsible for their part in this.
But going forward, in a system that you say is one of the best systems in America, or in the world rather, how, when cases like this don't go the way that, for instance, the victims who have been affected by it, who say that this is not something that they expected, or there's not the result that they wanted, how does a system like this get dismantled in order for justice to be served eventually?
Well, so that's an interesting question, right? I think the beauty part about what we've got going with the Ghislaine Maxwell trial is it's in front of a jury, right? It's not just in front of a judge. It's not in front of one person. It's in front of a group of people that are average citizens, regular citizens, that have kids, that have grandkids. And that, in my opinion, is the best way to get justice, right? Let the jury, let fellow citizens, their peers, make a decision. Now, obviously, there's a saying that I've heard from several people, and sometimes when you can't get justice in a court of law, the only other way to get justice is in that of the court of public opinion, right? And one of the fortunate systems of this case is the other people involved are high-profile people. They're not people that can go away and hide in the shadows. They're not people that can go away and disappear and change their name and move to another country or another place. There's a lot of people that are very recognizable, that can't hide, that have a lot to lose, right? They've got a lot of money to lose. They've got a lot of fame to lose. They've got advertisers that are attached to them. They've got businesses attached to them. There's a lot of people that have a lot to lose. And while the court hopefully will hold Ghislaine responsible for what she did, and hopefully based on what Ghislaine is willing to say and point out, the court will hopefully hold other people responsible as well. I think it's up to not just the American public, but the public around the world, because, like I said, these people come from all over the world. These are leaders from other countries, celebrities from other countries. It's up to the general public to hold these people responsible where the courts won't. If somebody's involved in this, and it's clear they're involved in this, stop going to their concerts. Stop buying their movies. Write their advertisers. Let their advertisers know they're a horrible person and you're not going to buy their product if you're attached to them. If it's a politician, vote them out. Make sure they take their power away from them. politicians work for us, not the other way around. Make sure they lose everything they have. And that's where it kind of becomes, important for society to hold these people's feet to the fire. If the court won't do it, then we as a people need to do the right thing and say, okay, listen, you may not have to do jail time for this, but you'll never get another dollar from me. And, I think that's the clearest message we can send. We can't continue to sit by and have what I call fake outrage, right? Where we get on our computer and we type on Facebook how upset we are about it, or we do this, we do the keyboard warrior thing, but then we still go out and we still support these people and the things that they stand for, and we still support their advertisers. No, that needs to stop. It's time for people to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak.
Right. And so, you spoke about progress, and you spoke about your organization being able to hear these stories of what young women have gone through in terms of sex trafficking and sexual abuse and so on. But, when we have cases like these, and when we talk about progress, how much progress are we actually making in terms of those stories being rehashed or those stories being retold? Because it's a traumatic process for many of these women who have to come forward and recount these stories. So is there any progress that has been made with these cases, do you think?
Well, that's a bigger conversation, right? So I guess when we start looking at that in a larger context, let's start out wide, and then we'll dial in. The larger topic is human trafficking, right? Human trafficking, human exploitation, and where we're at in the world with that right now. And the reality is, as much progress as we like to say that we've made in the world in regards to slavery and all of that, there are more slaves in the world today than any other time in history, in recorded history. And I think that says a lot about where we're at globally, as a society, right? And when people say, well, I hear about human trafficking, but one of the things that we hear here in the United States, and I've got several Canadian law enforcement friends that we work with and we share stories with. And one of the common things that we hear, especially in developed countries, is, well, that doesn't happen here, right? That happens in Mexico. That happens in Africa.
Right.
That doesn't happen in the United States. That doesn't happen in Canada, right? We're civilized. We have rules. We have laws. We're a society. Or the other answer we get is, it's mostly a Hollywood creation, right? Everybody likes to go back to the movie Taken, right? Yeah, it's a Hollywood creation. It's not nearly as bad as what people say. When in reality, the United States is one of the top 3 destinations in the world for sex tourism, sex trafficking. And one of the reasons is because, once again, it all goes back to money. Because we have the money to support it. We have the money and the buyers to support the demand. And so when we talk about trafficking and human trafficking as a whole globally, it's a problem that is getting worse, and it's just going to continue to get worse because of the money. And to put it into a perspective, maybe more people can understand, globally, human trafficking is around $130 or $140 billion a year business.
Wow.
That's a lot of money. And when you talk about it being that big of a business monetarily, and then you take, for example, all across the United States, right? Gas stations get robbed. Gas station clerks get shot for $50 in a cash register. If people are willing to shoot somebody over $50 in a cash register, what are people willing to do to protect a $130 to $150 billion a year global enterprise? And the answer is quite a bit. And I think a lot of that is being pointed out in this trial, the money involved and the difference that money can make. In this case, not only Does it happen in the United States? But the very people that are supposed to make the United States economy, the European economy, and these other developed nations' economies civilized and stable with their money are the ones committing the atrocious crimes. And so, when we start talking about cases as a whole, we first have to be willing to admit as a society that, when it comes to slavery, when it comes to human trafficking, we've not come nearly as far as we should. We've not put the services in place that we should to stop it. We've not taken the measures that we should to stop it. And quite frankly, we've looked the other way a lot when we shouldn't have. The thing about human trafficking, especially on a local level, right? When you start talking about your city, your town, your state, wherever it might be, it's a crime that, if it doesn't affect me directly, we'll just forget about it. It's one of those, if I had $1 for every family that I sat with, and every parent that I sat with over the last 10 years that told me, I never thought this would be me. I never thought this would happen to my child. I never thought it would happen to my sister. I would be a very, very wealthy person. I wouldn't have to work anymore, because it's the truth. Until it affects you personally, a lot of people just continue going on and ignoring it. And then when it comes to, how we prosecute these crimes, we still have a lot of work to do, prosecuting these crimes when it comes to understanding the trauma these girls have been through and the best way to deal with that trauma, and understanding that, when we prosecute these crimes, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? When we have these crimes and when we get them to the point to where they're ready to go to trial, one of the things that we do a lot of work with law enforcement, and one of the things that we try to do and we try to work with prosecutors to do is to find other ways to get the bad guy to go away, right? At the end of the day, the important thing is making sure that this young lady gets justice for what happened to her, but more importantly, the bad guy goes away and he's off the streets and he's not going to hurt anybody else. That being said, I don't care if the bad guy goes away for human trafficking, for weapons trafficking, for drug trafficking. If he goes away for 30 years on anything, that's 30 years he can't hurt anybody else. And so we work hard to build multifaceted cases, and fortunately that's a little easier than it would sound, because the human trafficking world almost always crosses paths with the drug trafficking world. They meet somewhere. We've been seeing them cross paths now in the last 5 or 6 years with the weapons trafficking world. And so, a lot of times we're able to build a case and make sure that if the young lady doesn't want to testify or can't, that she doesn't have to. We go out of our way to not re-traumatize the girls that we work with. We let them tell their stories on their terms, and it's cost us funding over the years. As sad as that sounds, right? We've had fundraisers come to us and say, well, your girls need to tell their stories. You need to tell their stories. And we've been very clear. Listen, this is their story to tell. I will talk to them. If they want to tell their story, that's great. And it empowers them. That's wonderful. But we're not going to stand on their tragedy and their story and use it to make a buck. That's just not how this works. But that's unfortunately what a lot of people, want to hear. They want to hear the stories. Well, these are the worst times in these girls' lives. If they want to tell the story because it empowers them, that is great. If not, let them deal with that trauma the way they need to deal with the trauma. It's not there for your entertainment. And so I think we need to do a better job of understanding the trauma these women and girls go through, and letting them deal with it, number one, the best way for that individual. Humans are dynamic people. You can't take a cookie cutter approach. You can't help somebody deal with trauma, the same way. Everybody's different. And so, and then also changing the way that we as society look at these girls. One of the things that we're working very hard to do when it comes to, helping these young women get reintegrated back in society is changing the terminology, right? We do our best to stay away from using the word victim as much as we can. And the reason that we do that is because while we're here and we're helping them get back on their feet and we're helping them work through this, right? There's going to come a time when those services aren't there anymore. We have finite services, and we only have so much time, so much to devote to one person. Eventually, they're going to have to take their life back. They're going to have to stand on their own 2 feet. They're going to have to get a job. And we use the term survivor, right? Because it's a psychological thing. If you tell somebody they're a victim over and over and over and over again, it's like in sports. If you tell somebody they're a loser over and over and over again, they're going to believe it. And we don't want these young ladies getting the victim's mentality and thinking that they're a victim. We need them to know that they're a survivor. They're powerful. They're strong. They've got the ability to take their life back. They survived a horrible thing, and they're actually a stronger person for it. And so it's a way of helping them get their life back and helping them take ownership back of their life and what's happened to them. So we've made some progress in how we're looking at this, and we work and train with other government agencies and law enforcement agencies all the time to help change that dynamic, change that view on these girls. And I think we are making some progress there, but globally, we're still choosing to look the other way at the problem on a global level, and that needs to change.
And, going back to the trial for a second, as it unfolds, and it's going to be unfolding in the next, in the next 6 weeks or so, in a couple of weeks, what's something that's standing out to you right now, or is anything that's stood out to you so far in terms of this trial unfolding?
I'll say this. One thing that's standing out is and we went over this earlier, the incredible lack of media coverage on it for the most part. That's the number one thing that's standing out. The second thing that's standing out is the information that is coming out of it, the news outlets that are reporting it, and what some of these girls have testified to, and what some of the other witnesses, not just the girls that were victimized in this whole thing, but the private pilot testified the other day to who was on that plane, to who the most frequent flyers on that plane were. That's testimony that everybody in the public should read. I'm not going to sit here and blast those names because I want people to go and look that testimony up themselves. Read the entire list yourself. Don't take my word for it. Read it in the print. Read it to what this guy testified. He flew the plane. He saw the people. America, the world needs to know who was on that plane and where they went. And so I think that the most important things that are unfolding are the testimonies that are coming out right now. I think, looking forward in the weeks to come, it will be very interesting to see if Ghislaine takes the stand in her own defense. Looking at it from a defense attorney perspective, I can see two sides of the coin on that on one side, it may be helpful for her to take the stand and tell her side of the story and why she was involved in this. Or maybe it's best for her not to take the stand and just stay quiet. I don't know what the defense attorneys know, so it's hard for me to make that call, but I think it would be enlightening, so to speak, to hear from Ghislaine. But I think looking forward in the weeks to come, the testimony from not only the girls, but the people like the pilot and other people that maybe weren't a part of this, but were able to view it from the sidelines because they were workers on the island, or they were, employees or assistants of some of these very famous, very popular people that were on this plane. I don't know if you had the opportunity to watch the Netflix documentary about the Epstein situation. I believe it was called Filthy Rich. But one of the most interesting, pieces of information that came out of that, one of the most interesting interviews, was the interview from I believe it was one of the groundskeepers.
Right.
That, told the story about who he used to see in the pool with very young girls all the time, and the names that he named. So I think I would like to hear more testimony from people like that don't have a dog in this fight, right? So to speak, because one of the things they're going to say about the women involved in this is, oh, well, they've got a dog in this fight because, they're going to get paid civilly, or they're going to, but these groundskeepers, these third-party people, they don't have a dog in the fight. They're just simply reciting what they saw. And so I would like to see some more of that testimony as well.
And so my last question for you is, so with a trial like this unfolding, it's obviously gained some attention, global attention as well. What do you think is the biggest lesson, or if there's any lesson to learn from a case like this? Is there a lesson going forward to take away from a trial like this?
I mean, I think, it's hard to say that there's a lesson to take home from this, because there's no upside to what happened here. Nobody wins. These girls don't win. Society doesn't win.
Right.
I mean, society takes a loss, because we're supposed to be better than this. And the people involved in this were for sure supposed to be better than this. And so, I don't know if necessarily there's a lesson, so to speak, but I think going away from this, I guess the lesson we should take away is where we're at in humanity right now, and take a survey about where we're at as people and what we need to do better and the things that we need to pay attention to. And, maybe we need to be a little bit more diligent, about holding people's feet to the fire. And maybe we need to be better when we go to the ballot box and we vote. And we need to make sure that we put elected officials in office that not only are people of good character and integrity that are going to do the right thing, but people that are going to appoint people to leadership roles that are going to do their job. The U.S. Attorney's Office in this case failed miserably the first time around with Epstein, and let him get away. We need to do better, So overall, I think that just a lesson in humanity, a lesson in what we can all do better, and how we can be, better people.
Well, I definitely agree with that as well. Just, as this trial unfolds as well. But Trent Steele, I want to thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for taking the time to share your insight with us, and we look forward to seeing the work that you continue to do. But thank you so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate it.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, perfect. So enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we talk again soon.